has to. Okay, so baselines are actually pretty easy to work with. I have some already showing in here, but let's look at where we see those. So if you go to View, Grids and Guides, right now I'm going to select Hide Baseline Grid, and it goes away. Again, View, Grids and Guides, Show Baseline Grid. That will just let me see them. It's not going to actually do anything to make my text interact with them. If I want to make my text actually snap to that grid, I select the text, and under my paragraph formatting tools, I can say align to or do not align to the baseline grid. If you don't see these options in your paragraph formatting tools, you can always go to the paragraph palette, and here at the bottom of the paragraph palette, you can select align to baseline grid, and it will snap. And this is a very helpful tool because now I can grab another item and actually this one isn't aligned, so I'm going to select it and tell it to align to the baseline grid. And then if I want it to easily align across the way, sometimes it will. And now they're both aligned. So that is a very simple look at the baseline grid. If you need to make adjustments to the baseline grid, you go to InDesign, Preferences, and Grids. And all your preferences are listed in this menu here, but we're in Grids. You can change the color of your baseline grid. You'll note that mine is set to charcoal, so it isn't so distracting. It actually is, I think it's cyan to start out, and it's a little distracting. So I set it to charcoal. It defaults to 12 point, which is a good size for body type, which is, like I said, most comfortably set at 8 to 10. And you can tell InDesign, by the way, to either put the grids behind or in front of your items that are on the page. This is less of an issue now that we're only working with type, but when you start putting images on the page, you may want the grid in front of the images. So just know that this is an option here. Now, if you decide, actually, I'm making my type smaller and I want to make this 10 point, I can click that and oh, actually, let me go back and see preferences, grids, yeah. And what happens is it forced everything to go to the next line because my type is just too big to handle that. So I need to make my type a little bit smaller to be able to sit on 10-point leading. So that's where if you decide you want to change your leading and you're using a baseline grid, you have to do it in InDesign, Preferences, Grids. And you have to change your baseline grid because that's forcing the leading. It's a forced leading, basically. One thing you can do also when you are setting, I'll go ahead and change the leading on this guy too. Sorry, the point size. One thing you can also do, and I'm going to take this off of the baseline, is if you just want the first line to be on the baseline, you can do that when you're setting a body style. So if I go to Paragraph Styles, Option click to create a new style, and I can go to, let's see, what is under Indents and Spacing. I can click Align to Grid, and I can do just the first line. And that's actually kind of nice because sometimes you want one column to have tighter leading than another column. And why is that? Well, maybe this is a column that has smaller text. You know, maybe you have a column that's really tiny type, like captions, and this other column is body text. It's bigger. But you still want to have a comfortable connection of alignment. So you can do just a first line alignment. So that is the basics of baselines. You can adjust how they sit within the margins in layout, margins, and columns. And you just want to, actually, no, sorry, it's under preferences, grids. And up here, it would usually default and start at 1/2 inch from the top of the page, which I think is really arbitrary on the part of the makers of InDesign. Like, why would your baseline grid just start arbitrarily at 1/2 inch from the top of the page? It seems to me that it should relate to your margin, as your margin is where the text is usually supposed to sit. So what I do is I come in here and I tell it to start at 0 inches relative to the top of the margin, not the top of the page. Does that make sense? Anyone have questions about that? That's how you get your baseline grid to sit neatly within your margins. Click OK.